So it's official. United Nations last week conclusively established that Israel had been committing war crimes in the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem, against Palestinian men, women, children, and babies. But the real question is, did you see any coverage in the mainstream media? No. Did UN itself hold a press conference or organize an emergency Security Council meeting based on this extraordinary finding? No. And we thought the UN were impartial. I wrote to the United Nations Human Rights Office asking for a link to a video of officials reacting to this incredible report, but did not receive any response. So, what did the report say? The report runs into 24 pages and describes the list of Israeli war crimes in greater detail. I have uploaded the report on my Telegram channel, details on the screen. Do subscribe to this channel to access this and other stuff that I'm not able to post here. So according to the report, and I quote, Israel has perpetrated a concerted policy to destroy Gaza's healthcare system as part of a broader assault on Gaza, committing war crimes and the crime against humanity of extermination with relentless and deliberate attacks on medical personnel and facilities. End of quote. Who is saying this? No less than the United Nations human rights body. And yet there is a deafening silence. Can you imagine how screwed up as a society we have become in the West? Navi Pillai, who led the investigation, said, and I quote, Israel must immediately stop its unprecedented wanton destruction of healthcare facilities in Gaza. By targeting healthcare facilities, Israel is targeting the right to health itself, with significant long-term detrimental effects on the civilian population. Children in particular have borne the brunt of these attacks, suffering both directly and indirectly from the collapse of the health system. End of quote. Didn't I tell you long ago in one of my earlier videos that Israelis were deliberately destroying hospitals, schools, and other places of learning because their objective was to destroy the whole generation of Palestinians with the support from the US, the UK, the EU, Canada, and Australia. Hamas was never their target. Releasing hostages was never their target, never their aim. This was the real aim. This is what the so-called civilized West wants. Massacre children, rape Palestinian hostages, destroy places of learning, hospitals and libraries, schools, colleges, universities, and don't even spare orphanages. Well done. This is how the Western countries prefer to be identified in the world. The enemy of humanity. Don't take my word for it. Now the UN investigation has concluded that Israeli security forces have deliberately killed, detained, and tortured medical personnel and targeted medical vehicles while tightening the siege on Gaza and restricting permits to leave the territory for medical treatment. These actions, the report says, constitute war crimes of willful killing and mistreatment and of the destruction of protected civilian property and the crime against humanity of extermination. The investigation further highlights the obvious, that attacks on medical facilities in Gaza, particularly those devoted to pediatric and neonatal care, have led to incalculable suffering of child patients, including newborns. In continuing these attacks, Israel has violated children's right to life, denied children access to basic health care, and deliberately inflicted conditions of life resulting in the destruction of generations of Palestinian children and potentially the Palestinian people as a group. The UN investigation paid special attention on the slaughtering of 5-year-old Angel Hind Rajab, who was brutally massacred with her family members while she was trying to escape the firing in her car on 29th of January this year. Israeli soldiers had fired 355 rounds of bullets on her car. That's how desperate they were to kill her and her family members. She tried to call the Palestinian Red Crescent for help. Israelis murdered the little angel as well as those from the Palestinian Red Crescent while they arrived at the scene to rescue her. Israelis have denied the allegations. The sponsor-in-chief of Israeli war crimes, America, has also denied this allegation. The State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller kept defending Israel. This was just on one occasion.
It's now 254 days since Israeli forces killed him in the job. While the IDF they maintain that this claim that they weren't in the area, our colleagues at Sky News said it's, quote, undeniable that they were, affirming a string of reporting that we've seen saying as much. The IDF then disputed that report and also said there's no misconduct investigation into that incident. So what's going on here? It's nearly been 9 months of the U.S. saying it's waiting for Israel to investigate itself. At one point, Israel even reportedly lying.
That's not what we said with respect to this particular investigation. With respect to this particular incident, we encouraged the government of Israel to work with parties on the ground that said they had information. The government of Israel said to us, and it said publicly, that none of those parties came and gave them the information that they have said publicly.
Right, and then
it's just a different matter.
Thank you for clarifying. And then the Red Crescent, they claimed that Israeli forces never reached out to them on the investigation.
Correct.
But all to say, this has been nearly 9 months of this. This case is, of course, just illustrative of tens of thousands of kids killed. So how exactly is the U.S. approaching this if, on this case, 9 months later, Israel is now saying there's no investigation into this incident? And how can the U.S. keep unconditionally sending more weapons if this is how Israel is dealing with investigations of potential violations?
So let's separate a couple of different things. This is, as I said, a little bit of different matter than other investigations into potential violations, which the government of Israel has said that they are conducting. You should go to them for questions about what they may or may not be doing. And with this one where they've said, and I know the Red Crescent has said something different, we're not in a position to ultimately adjudicate which bit of information is accurate and which is not. I can tell you what we are doing on behalf of the United States government, which is conducting our own assessments of a variety of incidents that raise questions about violations of international humanitarian law, and those assessments are ongoing.
Is this one of them?
I'm not going to speak to individual assessments. I've always made clear that's not something that I'm going to do. There are a number of incidents that are under review and continue to be under review.
So this just gets to one, I guess, broader question. The U.S. and yourself have noted that, of course, this is a complicated conflict, but why then has the U.S. response over this year been, in other words, just kind of binary? For example, after the IDF killed 7 World Central Kitchen workers, including an American, there were, of course, calls for investigation, urgings for accountability. The department then said in NSM 20 that it couldn't reach a conclusion of whether U.S. weapons were used in that attack. Result, more weapons have been sent. After the IDF killed American Aishanor Egi, there were calls for investigation. No updates. Just yesterday,
investigation that's ongoing.
Right, but yet, just yesterday, Representative Pramila Jayapal noted that she had sent a letter to the State Department asking for information on what accountability measures are being taken, whether there will be an independent investigation. She hasn't heard back, and
we will write back to her. I'm only intervening because, sometimes when there are four premises getting up to the question, it's kind of hard to remember them all when we get to the ultimate question. So we will respond to the Congresswoman, of course. We have made clear there needs to be full accountability, if merited, when that investigation concludes, and we'll continue to wait to see the results of the investigation. So get to the question, maybe.
Yes. There's Hinderjob, there's all these hundreds of journalists that have been killed, medical workers, over and over again. Despite the conflict being complicated, the question is to send more weapons or not to send more weapons. There's no notion of conditioning weapons on just completing investigations, respecting human rights, let alone stopping illegal settlements or the occupation. Why is that the case?
We continue to make clear that we are committed to the defense of Israel. That is a position that is not going to change. They are a country that are under threat from a terrorist organization in Gaza, Hamas, that we saw what horrible brutality they were willing to inflict on October 7th. And they continue to be under threat from a terrorist organization in the north, Hezbollah, that has launched rockets for a year targeting Israeli civilians. They continue to be under threat by Iran, that has launched ballistic missiles on 2 separate occasions at the State of Israel. So we're going to continue to come to their defense, but at the same time we come to their defense, we're going to continue to insist that they conduct their military operations in a way that minimizes civilian casualties.
But now the UN investigation has conclusively proved that the Israeli Army's 162nd Division operated in the area and was responsible for killing Hind Rajab and the family of 7, shelling the ambulance and killing the 2 paramedics inside. These were the 2 paramedics who had arrived to rescue her. This, the UN report says, constitutes the war crimes of willful killing and an attack against civilian objects. The report then goes on to talk about the brutalities committed by Israeli terrorists inside their detention centers on Palestinian hostages, including children. The report found that thousands of child and adult Palestinian hostages were subjected to widespread and systematic abuse, physical and psychological violence, and sexual and gender-based violence, amounting to the war crime and crime against humanity of torture and the war crime of rape and other forms of sexual violence. Male detainees were subjected to rape as well as attacks on their sexual and reproductive organs and forced to perform humiliating and strenuous acts while naked or stripped as a form of punishment or intimidation to extract information. The deaths of detainees as a result of abuse or neglect amount to the war crimes of willful killing or murder and violations of the right to life. Compare the silence on this to the hysteria that was generated by claiming falsely that 40 Israelis' babies were baked by Hamas in an oven. This has been a part of Israeli and the Western media toolkit. Create a smokescreen with a fake news and commit exactly those crimes against Palestinians. Since the global media, including the BBC, has been severely compromised, there will be zero outrage. They know that. Now, Israelis' brutalities don't end here. The report goes on to say that when Israelis release child hostages from their captivity, they do so only after they have inflicted enough torture on them to remain permanently traumatized with limited ability to locate or communicate with their families. They are also released unaccompanied and left at unknown locations so that these children can never be reunited with their loved ones. So, for example, if children from North Gaza were taken hostages by Israel, when they are released after months of torture, they will be left unaccompanied somewhere in South Gaza. With the current destruction in Gaza, it's almost impossible for anyone to trace their family. This is the face of terrorist Israel and terrorist America. And they call others terrorists. The report directly blames Israeli minister in charge of the prison system, Itamar Ben-Gvir, saying that the order to torture and abuse children came directly from him. And yet, he is not one of those on the list of war criminals wanted by Karim Khan, the prosecutor at the International Criminal Court. The report will be presented to the United Nations General Assembly on the 30th of October. This is what Israelis have been found to be doing in the occupied Palestinian territories. Now, war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu has openly threatened to replicate this in Lebanon.
You have an opportunity to save Lebanon before it falls into the abyss of a long war that will lead to destruction and suffering like we see in Gaza. It doesn't have to be that way.
Why wouldn't he? After all, he knows that he's had to face absolutely zero consequences for his war crimes. How did Blinken react to Benjamin Netanyahu's threat when he was asked about it? He called it hypothetical, meaning that let Netanyahu cause a similar devastation in Lebanon and then he will have his standard line ready, that Israel has a right to defend, any civilian dying in the conflict is a tragedy nonsense, and that's why we are working towards a ceasefire.
Support Israel if Netanyahu followed through on that threat that the Lebanese people would face definitely destruction.
I'm not going to get into hypotheticals. I can just say we're focused on resolving the border situation diplomatically and supporting whatever the Lebanese choose to do in terms of the state asserting its responsibilities.
Now you know why I call this Zionist a war criminal? Just pause for a moment, and I really want you to pause for a moment and imagine how you would react to the sight of a baby being shredded by 2,000-pound American bombs, vaporized. Now, if that visual doesn't move you, then you are mentally sick and you need urgent treatment. But even after watching that video, if you were to defend that Israeli action with a straight face, what should we call you? Certainly not a human. That's exactly these politicians and their spokespersons from the West, particularly in the US, the UK, the EU, Canada, and Australia have been doing. Can you call them human, let alone civilized? That's it from me. Thank you very much for watching my video. Thank you also for your support of this platform on buymecoffee.com and Patreon. If you do think that this platform is worth supporting, then you too should consider becoming part of it. In the meantime, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you all.